Profile webinar today. Dan and I will shortly be kicking off. It will just give a minute for you all to join, get comfortable, grab a cuppa or glass of something, and we look forward to joining you in just to say about a minute or so. It's the worst bit, isn't it, Dan?
It is. It's just going to get going.
There's a few of you joining now. Great to see some familiar names coming on board. Thank you for being here with us today.
Good number of people on today.
And all parts of the globe.
Yeah.
They're ready to make some noise with us today, I hope. With these kinds of familiar names, you don't want to hear just Dan and I today. You already know us probably quite well. All right, are you ready, Dan? Shall we kick off?
Let's go.
Let's go. All right, so a huge warm welcome for joining us here today to talk through our new leader strengths profile. So Dan and I are really excited to be here with you. The format is going to be around 25 minutes where we'll be sharing with you more around how to make use of the profile and what's in it. And then we'll also kind of be going over to you for Q&A as well. So what we're going to ask you to do is thank you for starting the chat in terms of your locations. Brilliant. We can see all parts of the globe already joining us, and feel very honoured to have taken up your time today. So huge thank you to you all. So what we'll do is keep chatting on the kind of informal, sharing feedback and anything you want to just, I guess, you know, gravitate towards each other around asking questions. But then the more formal people, do pop those in the Q&A, and we will be keeping an eye on those and answering those at the end for sort of the final 10 minutes or so. I would also just say any Australian folk and friends that are potentially watching the recording, you can email Dan and myself, and we will answer them personally, be your personal leadership coach if you have any questions. So I hope that sounds like a good session. So for those of you that don't know me, so maybe the odd one or two, I'm Trudy Bateman, the Director of Strengths Profile, and I've been leading the team here at Capfinity for around 80 years or so. And I've been working in occupational psychology for, I'm going to say just over 2 decades, leave it at that, Dan, in terms of people guessing my age. And over to you.
Thanks, Trudy. Yeah, good day, everyone. My name is Dan Collinson. I'm Senior Strengths Profile Consultant. I've been at Capfinity for 2 years now, just going to 2 years. But I've got about 15 years, I'm going to name them, Trudy, 15 years researching, applying and consulting in positive psychology. And all the way through, strengths has been my passion. So I love strengthening the world.
Brilliant, lovely, and thanks for being here with me today. So what are we going to cover here today? So I guess before we sort of get to what we're going to do here, I just want to share a little bit around that, why we've even put the strengths profile leader proposition, if you like, together. And for those of you that do know me, you've watched my videos, you might think I look a little bit older today. They're a few years of watching me, which is great. You know, most of you have been on that journey with me, I can see. But so we're all about legacy here. We're all about making a difference to the world. Our purposes at Capfinity is strengthening the world. And you know, we've been able to achieve an awful amount with what we've done over 14 years, which is how the strengths profile assessment is now. But the piece around leadership for me was a real missing point. It was when we strengthen leaders, we know that we strengthen many more people than those leaders, those individual leaders. You know, we're empowering the people that work with those leaders, the colleagues, their families, their team members, the organisation. So for me, it was, and the team, it was very much around filling this gap around really strengthening that world and helping, create that foundation for leaders. So there was this kind of, and also because I have this really annoying top strength of legacy, and it was like this bulb going off saying, this is the next project for you. So that's kind of a little bit of sort of background as to kind of our passion in putting this together. And then what we're going to cover today is literally a whistle-stop tour of Strengths Profile, just in case anyone is new to us, and our view of leadership, because of course there are different models out there around leadership. And then we're going to walk you through how you might use that profile to look at self-insight as a leader and think about potentially, unlocking that potential and mitigating any risk. Risk is much more of an area that we need to look at for leaders. And then we're going to look at how they might maximize the effectiveness in leading others and also leading their organization. So they're the points we're going to cover. As I say, please do post questions that you want Dan and I to answer. Let us be your coach as we go through, and then chat on if there's any kind of observations that you want to make. Now, some of you on the call I recognize as well, you actually helped us pilot the program as well on the profile. So you were involved in that research with us. As you probably know, product development isn't something we take lightly, and I had to develop my resilience and my courage and my counterpoint strength in going out to you all with feedback. So you helped us actually shape this final tool as well. So a huge thank you. So Dan, I'm going to hand over to you if that's okay, just to walk us through sort of highlights of Strengths Profile for anybody new here.
Thanks very much, Trudy. So for people who aren't familiar with Strengths Profile, when our approach to strengths at Capfinity are 3 elements. So performance, energy and use. And if you have taken our assessment and are familiar with it, you know that we sort of ask questions around these 3 areas. So with performance, we're looking at how well you perform when you're using your strengths. And then with the energy part, so how energized, how much enjoyment you get when you're using the strengths. And then finally, the frequency. So how often do you get to use these strengths? And that's what we use when we're sort of putting together the algorithm to analyze all the results for your profile. So a bit more about our world leading assessment. We cover 60 different strengths within the Strengths Profile. So we cover 4 different areas, what we call the quadrants. So we have our realized strengths, which covers ticks all 3 boxes from the previous slide. So the things that you perform well at, you find energizing and you get to use quite frequently. Then we have our learned behaviors. So some things that you perform well at, but you might find them draining or de-energizing when you're doing them, using them. We have our weaknesses quadrant. So some of the things that we perform poorly at. And then the exciting one that people get most excited about is our unrealized strengths quadrant. So these are things that you perform well at, you find energizing, but you just don't have the opportunity to use them as frequently. Also, it focuses on the action using the model of development and the actions you can take. We have training packages, toolkits and resources that may be useful to help build your use of strengths, but also that scalable talent solution as well. We're very proud to say that Strengths Profiles, we've had 100 million assessments taken now in 120 different countries. And now with the introduction of the leader profile, we have 6 profiles available. So we have our free starter, our introductory profile and our expert profile. Then we have the team profile and the manager one, and then now the lovely new leader profile.
Thank you, Dan. And before we go on to the next slide, I promise I'm going to stop soon at those profiles, but we know we've got one more launching at the end of the year, don't we? Watch this space. So in terms of the leadership landscape then, so here we want to sort of think about the broader leadership landscape and the need for, what we call the need for transformational and democratizing leadership. So we'll come on to that in a little bit more, but these are kind of the reasons again, obviously there's a real passion within the actual product itself to put the leadership version on top of strengths, but there's also this wider kind of consideration around the leadership landscape as well, and, you know, the complexity and what's going on for leaders out there as well. So, you know, we know that, you know, whatever's going on in the world, it does seem to be that leaders are, you know, having to pick up a huge amount of complexity, ambiguity. You know, it's a really difficult space for leaders to be operating. Not everyone was born a leader. You know, we're having to cope with, obviously, you know, what we call now unprecedented levels of challenges as well. We also think that leaders and emerging leaders, you know, are very diverse. They're very different. We want to appreciate that uniqueness in every single leader. They all have different needs and expectations that we wanted to take into consideration as well. We know that leaders quite ultimately can make or break the success of an organisation. They're absolutely critical to everything that organisation does. We talk about, you know, leadership being everywhere. We all have, you know, an area of responsibility, whether that's individual contribution, but we all have team members that we're working towards or with that kind of, you know, that we want to be able to mentor or coach, but we all take on leadership in its own right. And, you know, the sense of leadership development is definitely lacking. So, you know, we know that every year a company, one of the stats here, every year a company delays leadership, it can cost 7% of their total organisational performance. And, you know, often I think, you know, with leadership development, leaders are expected to be able to perform rather than kind of it being a continuous development as well. So that's kind of a little bit around, you know, some of the complexity and background to leadership. And then the SP's view of it, so the Strengths Profiles approach to leadership is it's really important for us when we set out on this journey that there isn't kind of a set way, if you like, to be a leader. We need to really appreciate individuality. You've probably heard me say this already, and Dan, I always forget the figure. Dan is our mathematician, but there aren't enough people in the world to have the same strengths profile as each other. It's like 1 trillion or something, is it, Dan? One in something trillion chance of somebody having the same strengths profile as someone else. It's a figure you can't pronounce. So, you know, everybody, that means, you know, shows up very individually, and we need to really embrace that. So there's not one set way, you know, that we really need to appreciate whatever a leader is bringing to the organisation, to themselves. That's what needs to be strengthened, what they already bring. So we don't put a model on top of what, you know, we think a great leader looks like. What we think a great leader looks like is your strengths and your skills being magnified to be made even better. So from that point of view, you know, Strengths Profile here is quite a scalable product for leadership development. Everyone can take it. It's accessible for everyone. Everyone can be their best who leads. It's, you know, knowing who you are at your best. When I first came into leadership probably about 10 years ago, I knew I wasn't going to be a traditional leader. I had very different strengths. You know, I wasn't necessarily, strategic awareness wasn't number one. Innovation wasn't number two. I kind of knew I was going to look a bit different. I didn't have a PhD in strengths. You know, what could I bring to leadership? So, you know, and from that, obviously, we're working in a strengths-based organisation. I was really fortunate. You know, it was that kind of passion and vision for strengths. It was the experience that I had. It was the, you know, genuinely wanting to make a difference around the product and everything that we do. Yeah, and that uniqueness is just so important to every single leader. So that's something we feel pretty passionate about here, not just with Dan and I, but that Strengths Profile, is that leadership is available to everyone. And then the kind of last 3 points are really around helping leaders then be their best in different ways. So we want them to be the best for themselves, for their careers, for their development, you know, for who they are and what they want to achieve personally. We then want to help leaders embed strengths across their teams and their organisations as well. And again, you can use this tool sort of across all the different levels of leadership as well, because you know, whether you're just starting out as a leader, there's different kind of levels and stages and things you can look at in the profile as well. So that's our approach to leadership. And now we're going to take a dive into the actual assessment as well. So just before we do that, we just a sort of a highlight really. Strengths Profile is obviously a Capfinity tool. We have a range of leadership assessments within Capfinity. So the Leader Strengths Profile forms one of those. But we also have the 360 which we look at a leadership framework. We also have our altitude, which actually does look at a defined model within Capfinity's kind of model of leadership. So whereas strengths profile looks at being our best with what we have, altitude will look at a model of leadership and 8 core strengths there. Lots of leadership interviews, micro exercises, and we can also customize work as well. So sort of the leader strengths profile is your sort of starting point, your foundation for strengths-based development work. But if you're interested in anything that we do outside of strengths profile, head on over to the Capfinity website. So Dan, over to you, if I may, to talk about some of the fundamentals and the decisions when putting this together.
Thanks very much, Trudy. So some of the fundamentals and some of the questions we had in the piloting have been, is it the same assessment? Is it a different set of questions? Well, it's exactly the same 180 questions as if you were to take the starter profile, the introductory or expert profile. So it's the same 180 questions measuring the same 60 strengths. As we say, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete the profile. Thinking around the leadership quadrant itself, so if you are familiar to the strengths profile, we have a leadership quadrant where we have up to 4 of your realized strengths, 7 of your realized strengths in there, up to 7 of your unrealized strengths, 4 learned behaviors, and up to 3 weaknesses there as well. So very similar to the existing profiles that you may have seen. We also cover the full 60 strengths within the leader profile. And which quadrants they sit in as well. So additionally, with the 60 strengths data, we're also using that to generate the rankings of the strengths families within the leader profile. And also it's important to add that you get with the leader profile a free free version of the expert profile, which is available to download. The expert profile will use the same data and results from the leader profile, but it'll be presented in the format of the expert profile as well there. If you've already taken a profile and you wish to upgrade, you can do. That's the good news. So you can do that by going into our store and using the upgrade function, and you'll be asked to pay the difference between what you paid previously for your profile. If you have a free starter profile and wish to upgrade to the leader one, you can do so by paying for the full price of the leader profile. So options there for you as well. We've been asked this question, but it's important to state it. So can you create team profiles based on the leader profile? The good news is yes. So as with the expert profile, a team profile can be generated using leader profiles. It would have the same format as a team profile existing currently with the expert profiles. So you'd have the quadrant profile and advice, as well as strengths families, data and results as well in there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan.
So thank you very much. So we want to go to the next slide. Thanks, Trudy. So taking a bit of a deeper look now inside the leader profile itself. So with the realized strengths, it gives you the leader specific content and advice on how you can lead yourself and those that you lead successfully, whilst also supporting your leadership within your organization as well. There's also a focus on the any hidden risks of your realized strengths, some that you may actually overplay or be in danger of overplaying. And there are suggestions in there about actions you can take to use your realized strengths more wisely, but also in the correct measure and in the correct context as well.
Go on then, Dan, give us one of a hidden risk of yours. What was an overplayed realized strength you had in your leadership report that you thought?
An overplayed strength in my leadership report, I think it could be adherence. So my #1 realized strength is adherence. And sometimes I may need to go off the beaten track. I may not need to just follow the same process all the time in my leadership style. So I need to make sure that I'm not too rigid in that respect.
Brilliant. You've just done a great job of me throwing you completely off course, by the way, interjecting you and asking you to give something that I hadn't asked in advance. So well done you.
It shows I know my profile report. Think about the unrealized strengths now in the leader report. So it highlights the leadership potential within people and how to maximize leadership and maybe take their leadership brand to the next level. So it's a really exciting quadrant to help people explore the unrealized strengths quadrant. With our learned behaviors and weaknesses, it's an exploration into the impacts they have on your leadership, whether it could be resulting in poor performance for yourself or causing you to feel drained or de-energized. And the leader profile gives you supporting advice about how to manage those or mitigate them, those learned behaviors and weaknesses, so they don't really negatively impact your style as a leader and your reputation. And then the bit of strengths families. So this was really exciting for us when we were developing the leader profile. There's a greater focus on the strengths families in the leader profile than in other profiles that we have. So we're very excited about that. So it covers all 60 strengths with a family's key. So there's a new icon in there showing you which family each strength belongs to. They're ranked now. They're ranked in order from 1 to 5. With also percentage given for each of the 4 quadrants within each family. So to give you understanding about the distribution across each quadrant, which is a great area for exploration of the strengths families, a really great starting point. And with the report, we also had give advice and guidance as well about how to interpret and reflect on your strengths families and the distribution across them all. And finally, we also have some coaching questions as well to really help people explore and have that opportunity to just reflect on the strengths families and the results and how they can use those as a leader moving forward.
Brilliant.
I'll pass back to Trudy now to talk more about the leader profile.
Thank you, Dan. And I think the point around the families is it's been a question that we've had from you as practitioners over the years on the expert profiles to say, well, more can we do with the families? So what we've done with the families is we've kind of had quite a big section at the back around families, so you can kind of lead your way into it gently, and then there's a lot there to cover, and there are some surprises. I'm going to be really authentic with you. That image that you can see, if you can't see top left hand corner, is actually mine. The top one of communicating, I was not that surprised at in terms of being my top strength family, but actually number 5 was relating, and that was quite a surprise. But the coaching then that I had afterwards was around actually, but which of my relating or realized and unrealized, what do I need to do about that? What do I need to do differently or avoid or do more of? So there were some real light bulb moments, even for someone that's been doing this for so long. Brilliant. So Dan's talked about how you can get leaders to help them develop themselves. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit around leading others and then leading the organization. So you then get a section that's all about leading others. And from my experience of leaders, and I'm sure yours is as well, is that, it's not always that natural to be kind of embedding strengths with others, or, kind of be doing it eloquently or doing it in the right way or having ideas on how to do it. I think that's the biggest kind of gap, is that actually how do I develop other people on their strengths? So without taking your leaders through a strengths development training program or being a coach, there are some great tools and tips in here within your realized strengths, how you would work with team members to develop them, get results from your teams, what it looks like with your counterpoint as realized, how you might really support a team meeting or a team scenario or a one-to-one conversation with your realized strength. So, and the same for the unrealized then, but it's all about, you'll know if you know the report, the switch between the unrealized is all about assuming that leader needs a bit more development advice and suggestions. It might be a bit stuck in that unrealized strength quadrant, being an unlocked area for potential. So lots of suggestions about how they can really activate those unrealized strengths with teams. And then we get to learn behaviors and weaknesses. And again, this is looking at kind of a team impact as well. I wouldn't say we had fun with this, but I do think that with leaders, there's an area here, certainly not with weaknesses, I wouldn't say this, but learn behaviors where we can't see the impact of our learn behaviors on others. I might even say, as I'm as arrogant to say, I don't need my adherents learn behavior. I've managed it well enough. I'm a leader. It's for me, it is a learned behavior. It can be a weakness sometimes, but I'm okay with it there. But then the report then helps you kind of think, but what does that look like? Does it make me look like I don't care about processes with my team? Does it make it, do I role model the process approach with my team? So it really helps leaders think about sort of turning that around and thinking about what's the impact on others with their learned behaviours and weaknesses. And then if we look at the final kind of section here on developing, then it's all around, you know, how do you help leaders, you know, really add that expertise into strengthening the culture of their organisation. And so we've spent quite a bit of time here thinking about, you know, values, people, engagement, performance, products, services, clients, you know, really kind of looking at these 4 areas and helping the leaders think, actually, you know, how do I get more involved using my strengths to make a difference in the organisation and the culture, to improve the culture, to help it to be more positive, to help it to be more strengths-based, and to take more of a lead in these areas as well. So again, lots of practical advice and lots of areas where potentially they might just need to watch out for those learned behaviours and weaknesses that maybe they're not being seen in that space in the organisation, and what they might need to do to kind of support themselves there as well. So absolutely, we need to kind of, you know, focus on all 4 areas, because that's, you know, as a holistic approach, that's who we are. But we obviously always focus more on the realised. So you'll get the 7 realised, 7 unrealised, 4 learned behaviours and 3 weaknesses there as well. And you know, with the leader, there's also sort of lots of tips at the end around how you might embed strengths. So around how managing learned behaviours and weaknesses, but also very much about embedding strengths. So that's kind of the report a little bit more in a nutshell. And then Dan, over to you, kind of, who would use this?
Thanks very much, Trudy. So the answer to that one really is anyone who comes into contact with leadership or leaders in the roles that they play. So HR and talent management leaders, it's a great low-cost tool you can use to help the leaders within your organisation to get a greater understanding about themselves and how they carry themselves as a leader and what their leadership brand is. And it's a sort of a tool that, you know, they can just pick up and play themselves. You know, it's very simple, 20 to 30 minutes to take their profile, and the report is at the end as well. Coaches, so increasing leaders' confidence and having them explore, you know, their own style and how they bring their strengths to their style of leadership. Particularly useful for coaches when they're working with leaders who are looking maybe to move to the next level in their role, or maybe a career move perhaps. So great opportunity for them to have some reflection. Educators, so looking with students who are potentially thinking around a career in leadership. It's a great place for them to start with a leader profile, to get to understand what their leadership, you know, how they can bring their strengths to leadership as they move through, and especially if they're going through a graduate program as well, when they go out into their first job. Having their leadership report would be a great source for them to use and reflect upon. And also to use them when they're thinking about those interviews and they're applying to jobs, thinking about how they can explain and bring across their strengths in their CVs or in those interviews, just to really embed, you know, how they've used their strengths to success so far. And then also individuals who are looking to think about, you know, their own future in leadership or their own role as a leader, and thinking about some of the patterns that they have for their leadership brand as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan. I know my son's 21 now, and he's just recently started a management program, and he did take it, although he took it quite independently. He said, "Don't do the work thing on me, Mum. I just want to naturally kind of, you know, go through it myself." And he said it's really helpful to just kind of think about areas in which he, you know, potentially could be stepping up into later on in his career. And I didn't do the work thing then, honest. So I know you're going to talk a little bit around feedback, Dan, but just to highlight, I guess, that you know, we have actually launched the leader profile towards the end of March. So it's we rolled it out then, and it's had a soft launch. So we've been working hard with you guys to get some really concrete feedback and keep improving it, ready for what we call sort of now for global release as such. So over to you, Dan.
Thanks very much, Trudy. So yeah, we've been so pleased with the feedback that we've got so far about the leader strengths profile has been really, really positive. And just thinking about some of the different areas of how it's being used and the feedback we've had. So coaches have been saying how the leader profile has really benefited their clients to think more strategically. So part of the quote here from Colleen is saying that it's a valuable inspirational resource for long-term partner use in our coaching. In the education sector, they've really enjoyed how the leader strengths profile covers leading self, others, and the organization. So those three different areas, with Anne saying that the leader profile is insightful, exploring your unique leadership strengths combination. And in organizations, they're finding the leader strengths profile is taking that strengths-based leadership proposition to the next level. They're loving that at the moment. That's the feedback we're getting. Steve saying it provides a deeper dive into actions that's relevant to a leadership role and enables a deeper conversation. So already we're starting to get the great feedback from our clients, thinking about how it's working well for them.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. And I think it's probably fair to say we've probably been a bit harsher in this report. Would you agree, Dan, in some of the feedback? I think it's quite direct for leaders, appreciating it, positive psychology. There is, I have enjoyed the counterpoint strength that I hold so dearly, but I cannot overplay for upsetting people. I've enjoyed being able to use that. Yeah, and the feedback as well. The feedback strength has been very useful in the whole process. With a bit of resilience and courage, eh? All right, so we're about finished. So what I'm going to do now is I can see a few questions come in, but give you an opportunity to populate any more Q&A. And just to just want to leave you with kind of next steps before we answer those questions as well. So with the leader profile, we have also launched the Strengths Profile Leader Program. If you've experienced any of my videos, welcome to me on the dartboard again. But there are 5 hours of online, or it can be in-person learning. So the online is on demand. There are 3 modules, and we look at kind of the real business case for you, and a bit more detail, of course, around the actual product and what's in it. And then we take you through each of the quadrants, each of the pages, the families, and we'll really go through sort of the methodologies and best tips and practice in each quadrant and each conversation that you have. And we talk about best practice as well, and helping you think about, what do you want from the coaching conversation that you're about to have with the leader, and what are we looking for outcomes as well. So you can do that online on demand. For our Australian friends and family, Sue Langley has kindly offered to put one together in person, so you can find more details around that. That's on the 29th of August. Dan, we've offered to try and help her out on that one, haven't we? We almost fell out. We're just waiting for her to accept the flights. I think she needs more coaches personally. And also just to tell you that not now launching on the 1st of July, we have 25% of all of our individual programs running in July and August in our Upskill for Summer campaign as well. So I am going to just share Dan and I's details for you to jot down. Again, if you're listening to this virtually, then please do let us have any questions, or you can also give us some feedback offline as well. So that's Dan and I will stop sharing the screen in a moment, just so you get a whole picture of us as we answer these questions. Just as you're taking a note down there, I'm going to start on the questions, if that's all right, Dan. We'll share them out. So I'm going to take the first one from Liz. It's a brilliant question. Why does the tool talk about weaknesses, given that it's a positive psychology approach? We all get drawn to the weaknesses section. So definitely, you're 100% right. So there are a couple of things here. Is that we purposely devised a holistic tool because we are human beings and we do get drawn to things like our learned behaviours and weaknesses. But what we do is we feature many more strengths than we do weaknesses and learned behaviours. So you'll notice in the quadrant it's sort of 7 realised, 7 unrealised, and then we'll look at the 3 weaknesses and 4 learned behaviours. But we've also found, as human beings, we keep focusing on the weaknesses. So let's have honest and open conversations about them and know what's there. I talk about adherence in mine. I've also got persistence in there. I give up to new shiny things, sparkly things. But if they're honest conversations, I need people around me to help me with those things. And then also I would suggest that As we've all got weaknesses, we're all really open and honest about them. We can have a strengths-based approach in our teams as well. So, we can all, often when we've got weaknesses and we're open and honest about them. Dan has a top strength of adherence. I have it down below. We make a good partnership, and there's lots of that going on when people are open and honest about about what they have in their weaknesses. But you're right in terms of the approach. We do talk about mitigating them. We do talk about using them less. We definitely don't want to develop them. We definitely don't want to encourage the use of them, but we must understand the impact, and even more so for leaders, we can't ignore them. So what have we got that sits then? How do we use our strengths to compensate? Is very much the approach there. So I'm going to just stop sharing the screen for a moment. The big C you can see down there, our Cat Affinity logo, is our lovely Lizzie that's sitting behind the scenes there for any logistic questions as well. So Dan, I'm going to hand that next one over to you for Rena, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I think also the next one from Eversley as well, they're quite sort of similar questions. So they're asking what's the key differences between the expert and leader profiles. So they both cover all 60 strengths, which is fantastic. But with the expert profile, it will get advice and guidance for all of your 60 strengths, whereas in the leader profile, when we go through the quadrants, we look at the top 7, realized strengths, unrealized strengths, then the 4 learned behaviors and 3 weaknesses. The key one, I would say, the difference between the two is that the advice and guidance given in the leader profile is leader specific. So it will be thinking about the three areas for realized strengths and unrealized strengths of you're leading yourself, so giving advice and guidance on that, leading others, so those that you lead, and also leading the organization. Also, additionally, we have the hidden risks section in the realized strengths quadrant as well. So the leader profile really is the content and advice and guidance really is geared up specifically for leadership, whereas the expert profile, it could be used in personal development, not just necessarily professional development. So I think that's what I would say in a nutshell is the difference between the two.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. Yes, very much focused around all the different angles of leadership and leading others, leading teams, leading culture. And you say the hidden risks being quite an important piece to kind of unveil. You wouldn't believe, Dan, I'd have a risk in my overplayed humour strength, would you? Like, I put colleagues on the spot, make it awkward for them. There's nothing overplayed here going on at all. I've obviously forgotten to read my humour hidden risk there. So I'm going to take the next one in terms of, did you consider basing the profile on a leadership model? Most definitely, Dan and I did an awful lot of research, as many of the team did. We kind of thought that there is no one leadership model that we kind of agreed with wholeheartedly. Leadership will change, priorities, complexity, all will change. And ultimately, our approach has always been be your best self. So whether we are a leader or not, whether a future leader, take what you've got, take all that magnificent, amazing uniqueness and shape it, develop it, do more of it with a bit more skill. I talk about the Goffey and James work there. Develop it, and think about the people that that have done amazing things. Steve Jobs was amazing up 2 or 3 things rather than the 19 realized strengths that you might have on average. So really important that we look at making the best of what we have as a leader and doing it even better. When I first had my leader profile or any other profile, and I've always seen humor in there for 14 years, you kind of think that's not an important attribute for a leader. But for me, it's been critical in terms of my resilience to be able to bring my team together, to be able to kind of support challenging situations. I wouldn't be without my humor, but I would never have appreciated what it meant to be a leader with humor without it. Now, I wouldn't have put a model with humor right at the top. I'm not, but actually it really helps me. So I think it's really important to practice that uniqueness as well. So we didn't base it on a model. We based it on being the amazing best version of ourselves. Dan, I'm going to give you the next one if that's okay. I've got a couple more here. Tell us a bit more about why you decided to feature the strengths families more in the profile.
Yeah, we wanted to really incorporate the strengths families because the 5 different families really felt represented 5 different areas of leadership activities and tasks that need to do. So the communication, the being, the thinking. So we really wanted to exploit that. Let's look at the data. We've got 60 different strengths that we can use the data from in people's reports. So we wanted to bring that out more, because there's an opportunity for more, certainly for leaders, to think about the families in more depth for the work that they do and they carry out. So that was our real driver for that, and saying, well, okay, how can we analyze that? What can we do with that? And how can we also give the advice and guidance to help people to understand their families and how they, relate to their leadership brand?
Yeah, thank you. And Dan, what's your top ranked family in Leader?
Mine is communicating.
Oh no, I didn't know that. We've both got the top
It's
family.
very close to relating as well.
Yeah, and that's it. Sometimes in the family ranking, there's not much in it, so don't get too kind of stuck in that space. But it does just help you have some conversations that you might not have had before. What does it look like when we're doing too much, too little? Are they all learned? Are they all unrealized? So it just gives you this kind of pattern of really helping. And think about leadership brand the families can help with as well. One more here. Which is the best tool you would recommend for coaching senior leaders? Do you want to take that, Dan?
So the best tool, so for senior leaders here, would be the leader profile, because you get the leader profile, but also with it, you get the expert profile as well. So what we tend to recommend is have that debrief with the leader profile first of all, but then there's the opportunity to explore with the expert profile that comes free with it at the same time. So it's a journey with the leader, and using both profiles in conjunction with each other really does work well with those senior leaders.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. I mean, it's also worth saying, so we have a model version of a leader profile within Capfinity called Altitude as well, and that does look at kind of a definition of 8 core sort of strengths and skills that define great leadership. So you'd be measuring people on that, and that's very much what we would call assessment for development, where you really need a robust assessed tool where you're looking at defining leadership in your organization, perhaps, or you're looking at, you want to be able to use a model because you're looking at more of kind of a robust assessment model of leadership, if that makes sense. So you're looking at defining it and measuring people on the back of it. So we always talk about strengths profile not being appropriate sort of for necessarily hiring or letting people go, because it's it's a self-development tool, whereas Altitude is an assessment that people are measured against. So I hope that makes a bit of sense there if you wanted to go and have a look at what else there is on the Capfinity side. I don't have any more questions on Q&A. I'll just give you a moment or two just to see if there's anything else up your sleeve. So you have access to Dan and I on email, or do find us on LinkedIn as well, because we often put things out there. So if there aren't any more questions, Dan, thank you for your time today. And also a huge thank you to you for joining us, and to hear more about what we've been up to at Strengths Profile for the last 9 months. My writer and detail are firmly parked and unrealised now, Dan. We're giving them a rest.
Not weakness for me, truly, writer.
If anybody spots anything wrong, any detail, it was Dan. So thank you for your time, everybody, and stay in touch. Let us have your feedback. We would love to hear from you. If not, then enjoy. Amazing. Thank you for your feedback there, Sarah, who's already using it with 20+ leaders. Thank you so much.